This is Kieran Collins. He's been beaten within an inch of his life and forced to flee to England. It's the second time he's suffered a so-called punishment beating from the IRA. This is Martin McGuinness, the man who'll lead the Sinn Féin delegation if they join the Irish peace talks. He's also the man who guaranteed Kieran Collins would be safe if he went back to Ireland. Last week, John Major reiterated that Sinn Féin could not join peace talks without a new ceasefire.
We have made it absolutely clear throughout those exchanges that the IRA and Sinn Féin should give up violence once and for all and commit themselves to exclusively peaceful means.
Later, in an interview, he added this.
They now know that all those activities, including paramilitary beatings, must stop.
Tonight, the Cook Report reveals the true face of the man who talks of peace but refuses to stop violence. The brutal beatings of hundreds of people who in most cases have in law committed no offence at all.
I fell 40 feet. I dove out head first. If it had been 100 feet, I'd have still jumped in because I was completely terrified.
Nobody has the right to be judge and jury on anybody. I mean, they're not a judge. They're terrorists.
They can kill me, certainly, they can take my life. But why should I be afraid of them? They've killed my son.
As far as I can see, Martin McGuinness is a lying bastard.
This is what the Protestants call Londonderry and the Catholics call Derry in Northern Ireland. It was here in the Cregan, a Republican stronghold, that Kieran Collins lived with his family. And it was here that he was twice given punishment beatings by the IRA. After the first, he was exiled, put out in IRA parlance, to England for a year. Last month, he married his longtime girlfriend, Annette. His family was told by Sinn Féin leader Martin McGuinness that it would be quite safe for him to return to Northern Ireland for a honeymoon. A fortnight ago, he went to this bar in the Cregan, and for the second time in 18 months, he was given a terrible beating.
Masked men come in, they fired shots up on the ceiling. They ran straight under the pool room. They turned around, one of them started shouting, "He's not here, he's not here." And then the next thing in, I knew it was me they were looking for because a baseball bat came off the back of my head. And I jumped up and ran towards the pool room. They try and get away, like, and as I ran towards the pool room, they came behind me and started beating me with the bats. Well, as they were hitting me with the bats and all, one of them kept he lifted 3 tables altogether. They're cast iron legs and all on them. He smashed them down on top of me. And then one of them lifted a broken part of it and stuck it through the bottom of my leg. It took a doctor 3.5 hours to stitch, because he had to stitch it from the inside and work his way up, packing it, stitching it, packing it, stitching it. And it took him 3.5 hours just to stitch out one part of my leg. I've got fractures on that side of my leg here, on this side of my leg here, coming up the kneecap. I've fractures here on my knee and on this side of my knee. And I have a fracture here on my leg. Coming up under my hands, I've got fingers broken, this hand here. That one's broke across there and up that way. And this one here is broke that way and down that way. And that's the way they strapped it up. The tendons were all done here on this hand. There's a fracture just underneath where the sling is here. There's my wrist broke here. There's a fracture here on my arm. And there's a fracture on my elbow down here. On my head, I've got lacerations on my head. I got stitches along my head here, down behind my ear here, where they stuck a pint glass and a half pint glass in, and then bit me in with a baseball bat and on top of a glass as well on the bird. They take me back into the hospital that day again. They says I shouldn't even be out in the house. They says there's that many injuries that I shouldn't be out in the house. I have to go back into the hospital again to get sorted out. It's going to take a long time to heal.
Kieran's bride, Annette.
I think they're animals. They really are. There's no call for the way they leave people lying like that.
News at 10 with Julia Somerville.
Celebrations as the IRA says the violence stops at midnight. Gerry Adams challenges London, seize the moment for peace.
After the IRA ceasefire in August 1994, there was joy on the streets of Northern Ireland. But it was short-lived. The bombing stopped, but the street violence on both sides increased. IRA punishment beatings alone rose from 10 in the 18 months before the ceasefire to 325, almost one every other day in the 2 years after. Nancy Gracie is a founder of Outcry, a pressure group opposed to all paramilitary punishment beatings and shootings.
We thought when the ceasefire was called that the violence would have been over. It didn't. These beatings are worse than shooting a person in the legs.
I feel that sometimes people prefer being shot because I think sometimes the effects of these punishment beatings are almost worse than the effects of a simple gunshot wound.
Lawrence Rock, consultant in the Accident and Emergency Unit at Belfast's Royal Victoria Hospital, has had to treat hundreds of kneecappings and punishment beatings.
I think it's immensely hypocritical in that the people who seem to be doing this would claim to be protecting the communities in which these incidents occur. That sort of thing seems to me to be tremendously intimidatory to their own people, and therefore presumably is done for those kind of reasons. And I would see that, therefore, as probably the worst kind of terrorism that occurs in Northern Ireland.
In this year alone, there's been 154 beatings by Republicans and 130 by Loyalists. The Loyalist now is actually shooting young ones in the legs. They're back to the kneecapping. And the reason for that is because they're imposing fines of between 100 and 1,000 pounds on their victims not to be beaten. I mean, these people are hypocrites. They say they represent the people. They don't. They can't. Can't be hypocrites and say that. They're terrorising them.
18 months ago, Kieran Collins got his first punishment beating. He says it followed a row after a football match, but he was never given a proper explanation. His brother Martin, a Sinn Féin activist who was in the house at the time, was also attacked. The family videoed their terrible injuries, inflicted with baseball bats, studded with nails, scaffolding poles and rocks.
Well, I had nail holes all over my body, up and down my legs. I had to get an operation on my elbow where they stuck a 6-inch nail through my elbow and it came out the bottom part of my arm. Fractures, my fingers were broke. I had cuts all over my body and my whole back, right down one side, was pure black. It was just like one big massive bruise from my shoulder down. They broke my scapula. I was in hospital. I got out of hospital. It took me about 4 or 5 months before I could even start walking properly again. And once I started walking properly again, I got a phone call. And says the person on the phone says he was from the Republican movement, and I had 48 hours to get out of the town.
Kieran Collins took refuge in Derry's Roman Catholic Cathedral.
I went to the chapel, took sanctuary in the cathedral chapel. The bishop says I could stay there for as long as I want. The family came down to see me every day. Everything was, it was like a form of protest. I just got fed up with them. They annoyed me that much, I got fed up with them, so I decided to protest against them.
The IRA claim punishment beatings stop crime in areas where the RUC can't patrol. But the RUC were called in by Kieran Collins.
When the police come in to interview me, the first words out of their mouth was, "Why?" Says, "You're not even on our books." Says, "You're not down as a thief. You're not down as a burglar. You're not down as anything. So why did they do you?" The police even said that there to me, and I just turned around and says, "I don't know."
Martin McGuinness has cultivated the image of a God-fearing churchgoer, but behind the mask of piety, he's feared as the IRA hardman with the power over life and death. He plays a leading role in the Republican political wing Sinn Féin. On the campaign trail as a young man, he wooed the voters, just as surely as we discovered today, he woos the mothers of Republican terrorist victims.
Martin McGuinness went up into my mother's house, and there was other members of the family there, and he held my mother's hand and told my mother, Kieran's out for a year. If he leaves the chapel, Kieran's out for a year.
After 3 weeks, Kieran Collins agreed to leave the cathedral to ensure his family's safety and go and live in England for a year. Former British agent Martin McGartland was also targeted by a punishment gang. He was kidnapped from a Sinn Féin advice centre and taken to a third-storey flat. He escaped by jumping through a window.
There was an ambulance sent to the scene where I jumped out the window at 10 minutes past 6 that evening. So I've been held there for 10 hours. And basically what happened was the people who had been holding me ran down the stairs and dragged me for 25 yards, trying to get me back to the actual flat. But I think whenever they seen the wounds and the blood on me, like unconscious, I think they thought that I was dead, and they fled.
After his escape, his brother Joseph was attacked as a reprisal.
They took Joseph, carried him into a van outside, and drove him a couple of hundred yards to the nearby Balmurphy estate, where they put a rope around his feet and hung him upside down, a couple of feet off the ground, and beat him with scaffolding bars for 15 minutes.
Would the IRA have known about this?
They would have ordered it. They would have ordered it. So, I mean, nothing. The IRA just don't go and use a Sinn Féin centre without approval from Sinn Féin. I mean, people are going to have to understand, Sinn Féin is a cover name for the IRA. Sinn Féin were well aware that I got kidnapped. Sinn Féin people, Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness, have been involved in terrorism for the last 25 years and beyond that.
3 years ago, in an earlier Cook report, we revealed that the death of Frank Hegarty was directly linked to Martin McGuinness.
I feel very bitter now and full of regrets that I ever let him in the door. That's how I feel. That I ever let him come in my door. Such an evil man.
Hegarty's mother, Rose, now 85, was befriended by McGuinness to get to Frank. He was suspected, unknown to his mother, of being an IRA informer hiding in England. When Hegarty did return, Martin McGuinness called again.
He got out and said to me on his knees, there's nothing going to happen to Frank. I'll bring him back.
She was told that McGuinness, whose position gave him the power of life or death, would guarantee Frank's safety.
Suppose they done with him what they done with every other body. They threw it in the road like a dog. His body.
Frank Hegarty was suspected of betraying the IRA. But these days, according to Hugh Loosley, an SDLP councillor in Lisbon, simply criticising them will bring reprisals. He criticised the IRA in a television programme, and a few days later, he was attacked in a pub.
One of the members of the IRA came round to the front of me and told me, we are going to stop your effing television performances. Next I remember was being hit on the back of the head with something and going to the ground.
He was attacked again after another broadcast, and several times since he's had to call the police to his house.
I have no doubt that the IRA, in conjunction with Sinn Féin, are setting up these punishment biddings. I have no doubt that active members of Sinn Féin have sat on kangaroo courts and orchestrating punishment biddings. I have no doubt about that. And that's why I believe, the stand I have taken, where I said that I will finish my electoral role in May of next year, that I will stand down and I will not stand, because I can't swallow the pill where people see Sinn Féin as being the good guys now. Because I still believe there's an element within that organisation that still see themselves as the paramilitary godfathers. And a good suit and a briefcase doesn't change that to me.
Kieran Collins would certainly agree.
You're in a no-one situation because, I don't know if you understand, but where we come from a nationalist area where it's like, you don't go to the police. If something happens, you just don't go to the police. Like, that's just the way it's always been. It's the way I've been brought up. I've been brought up on it, and if something happens, you don't go to the police. And then Sinn Féin then come out and they do things like this here. The Nazis done this here to the Jews in the war. The Nazis done this to the Jews in the war, like they smashed their bones and just for being a Jew. You know what I mean? And they're coming out and they're trying to justify it. Like, how can they justify doing something like that? And then they won't give the reason why they do it. I mean, they just go out and they do these things. To me in Derry, the IRA in Derry are dead. The IRA in Derry are a mafia. They're not on it. They're not on it to fight for freedom. They're the Irish Republican mafia. They're in it for money and nothing else. If I had money, I wouldn't have got the first bidding, because I could have paid them off. It's as simple as that. I'm not saying I could have paid Sinn Féin off, but I could have paid the boys off if it was going to give me the bidding.
Malachy Clark was given a punishment beating for glue sniffing when he was 16. Less than 2 months later, and just 2 days after his 17th birthday, he hanged himself. His father says that after the attack, Malachy made a statement to the police. Afterwards, he was frightened to go out because he feared retaliation.
Malachy became more and more introverted, you know, and agitated. And he kept complaining of these people, you know, out in the street, you know, intimidating them, continuing to intimidate them, you know. And then some 6-7 weeks after the attack, he committed suicide by hanging himself in my flat.
Who found him?
I found him. And he left a note which squarely laid the blame, you know, at the rats out on the streets who had driven him to it. So there's no question in my mind, like, that the input of that beating, how it affected him, you know. Oh, I was raging so much. I was raging, you know. I was so full of rage, so I was just seeing it like a tragic waste, you know. Yeah. Young life like that, you know. Because only then did I realize, you know, how the vast majority of people, like in these ghetto areas, turn a blind eye, you know, to the most horrific and brutal atrocities perpetrated by these so-called freedom fighters.
When Gerry Adams, the Sinn Féin president, went to the White House to meet President Clinton, Tom Clark staged demonstrations against IRA punishment beatings.
While he was being feted by President Clinton and they were all singing Danny Boy, families in Northern Ireland and Republican areas, nationalist areas, were being smashed, having their furniture ripped and the houses burned, whole families being ordered out of the country. Young lads being turned upside down on spike railings, having their legs and limbs smashed and their skulls fractured, while he's been singing Danny Boy in the White House. Nothing could have been more disgusting as far as I was concerned. And I was there to try and do my bit, you know, to make the media aware of that.
Former Mayor of Derry, Pat Devine, says the reasons given for punishment beatings conceal the truth.
They are presented to the general public and to communities, rather, in certain parts of our town and Northern Ireland as a protection, as security, as something that people need in the absence of an acceptable police force. But I think the sinister side to it is that it is a method, a very effective method, to control the community.
And he has no doubts who controls the beatings.
I think Martin McGuinness and other people are in a very strong position in convincing other people, maybe other organisations, that this should end. I think he and other people can bring this scourge of punishment beatings to an end and release the community from it.
A good illustration of how beatings, which are even more brutal as time has gone by, are essentially controlled is when President Clinton visited Northern Ireland last year, and immediately there were no beatings, and then as soon as he went, they were turned on again. And I think that illustrates very clearly that this is a question of political control and intimidation by the provost of Catholic communities to make sure that their writ runs.
The family of Kieran Collins was told by Sinn Féin that he could safely return after his 14 months in exile. Collins himself wanted more reassurance.
I asked the members of family and they make doubly sure because I wanted to be really sure and that it was safe. They then went and contacted Martin McGuinness, and we're talking to Martin McGuinness. Martin McGuinness assured my family that my year was up on the 14th of September and that I was absolutely safe to come home and there was absolutely nothing going to happen to me.
Well, what do you think of Martin McGuinness now?
He's a liar. It's just, that's all I can say. He's a liar. My family know what he said. Me and members of my family know what he said. Me and members of my family know what he didn't say. So no matter what he says, I don't care what he says to the media. I don't care what he says to people on Derry. I don't care if he stands up on a stack of Bibles and says it. Martin McGuinness lied to members of my family. He told lies, he must have told lies, he had to have told lies. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened to me.
Kieran Collins admits he's been a lifelong IRA supporter. He spent a total of 8 years in jail, so he's paid his debt to society already for conspiracy to rob a bank and other offences. But the head of CID in Belfast, Derek Martindale, says most victims of punishment beatings have no criminal record.
A lot of these young fellas are guilty of no crimes whatsoever. In fact, those who are committing the crimes are guilty of far greater crimes than the victims have ever been guilty of.
So how do you put an end to this evil business?
It's difficult because these people are seeking to control the community. Anybody who comes forward from the community invariably will be subject of attack themselves. So it's a vicious circle. It's a question of control, of intimidation and manipulation.
Part of the role of someone like me who has access to the media is to try to make available to all what's known to a few. And what's known to a growing number is that Sinn Féin and IRA are facing these accusations of involvement with violence, and yet we're trying to create the conditions where they can come and become ordinary politicians, saying goodbye to violence, saying that's history.
And the man who can change history? Martin McGuinness.
If he had said to me I wasn't allowed back, I wouldn't have went back. I could have sent the photos home, I could have done anything like that, but they told me it was safe. They told me it was all right to come back. It was lies. They just come and beat me all over the bar then. Stuck glasses on me and all, and laugh while they were doing it. Says we were from the Republican movement and laugh while they were doing it. And then even the boy was in charge, the boy was standing back watching them doing it. When the boy stood back after they were beating me with the bats, he handed the other boy the gun, says he never got enough. And he came in and started beating me with the bat, and me, the other boys come back and beat me with the bats. He said, this kept hitting me and hitting me. At that time, man, I begged the man to shoot me, because that was that. It was, you can't describe the pain. The pain was beyond pain. It was just that much. But it was all down to lies.
And still the beatings go on. Only on Sunday night, two families on opposite sides of the same street in Dungannon were thrashed and terrorised by IRA gangs who gave them 48 hours to get out of the country. Both were told not to talk to the media, and in this, they can take their example from Mr. McGuinness. Once again, Martin McGuinness refused to speak to us and made himself unavailable. His advisors told us that punishment beatings were simply not an issue. Well, try telling that to Kieran Collins. Try telling that to Rose Hegarty, or to Tom Clark, or any of the other 325 other people who've suffered as a result of punishment beatings, kneecappings, or worse, since the ceasefire first began. And remember, this is suffering, and these are beatings that Martin McGuinness could stop tomorrow, if he wanted to.